Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 20th September 2023. My name is T.S.V. Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. Hardan, 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 Haribol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been discussing about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. Actually, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been doing in all my previous videos. So, kindly subscribe to this vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous and future videos. So let us continue with the topic for discussion for today's video. Today we will try to analyze a very important term in materialism and spiritualism called liberation. Liberation from the cycle of endless births and deaths of a human living entity. But before doing so, let us have a recap of all that we have learned in my previous videos. There is a time when the spiritual spark gets in touch with this huge material world. At that time, this irritated material world encompasses or surrounds or envelops this particular spirit soul into a cocoon containing of 4 layers of material body. Of these 4 layers, the first 3 are made up of a material element called ether, and the fourth gross body is made up of 4 other material elements called air, fire, water, and earth. These 4 layers are as follows. The first layer, which is nearest and touching the spirit soul, is called the causal body of intelligence. The second layer is known as the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. The third body is called the etheric body of senses, namely sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. And the fourth is called the gross body, which is made up of those four elements, that is, air, fire, water, and earth. A living entity is recognized in this society only because of this front of his or her gross body in a lifetime. This body may be of any shape or size or with any type of looks, whether human or inhuman or otherwise. This particular living entity is known only by that gross body. When the spirit soul is trapped or enveloped in these four layers of the material body, it sheds its initial identity as just a spirit soul and instead becomes a living entity. When this particular spirit soul turns into a living entity, sooner or later it gets into an endless cycle of births and deaths in this particular material world in different species. The first birth that this living entity takes is that of a mere cell. Then it progresses towards amoeba, algae, grass, weeds, shrubs, creepers, plants, trees, snails, insects, worms, ants, amphibians, birds, bees, reptiles, etc., finally reaching the stage of being born as a human being. The difference between the human being or the human birth and that of other births in other species is that in this case, when a living entity is born as a human being, his or her destiny or karma begins and his or her sixth sense is activated. What is liberation? This cycle of repeated births and deaths goes on and on and on. It is surprising to note that even when this living entity is lucky enough to be born as a human being, thanks to his or her karma or destiny, he has or she has to take birth in almost all the 400,000 species of human birds alone, unless and until he or she escapes this rut of repeated births and deaths thanks to his or her karma, destiny, and decision to enter the path of spiritualism. When this living entity enters the path of spiritualism and begins treading towards self realization, only then he or she realizes that his or her actual identity is not that of a living entity but that of a spirit soul. When this self realization dawns on one particular spirit soul, then the next step for that spirit soul is to find its true position as an entrapped soul in four layers of human body and going through all these births and deaths. Love, hatred, pain, sorrow, happiness, feelings, emotions, etc. become a part of this living entity's life in every of these births, whether in human species or otherwise. This uh, pain or this position is of no end, or it does not have any end till the same living entity decides to get liberated from this repeated cycle of birth and death. This problem or this position, this hapless position of a spirit soul turned a living entity goes on and on and on till he or she ultimately gets liberated from this endless cycle of births and deaths. Now we will discuss about this liberation part of a spirit soul turned living entity. Liberation is not so easy or fast a procedure. In fact, it takes a lot of time even for this material world to get irritated by this newly connected spirit soul and wrap it with layers of material body. It does not happen immediately. It takes eons for every layer of body to wrap this spirit soul, whether that body is causal, astral, etheric, or gross. It in fact takes probably millenniums before one spirit soul gets completely enveloped by all these four layers and thus becomes a living entity which is poised to enter the endless chain of repeated births and deaths in this material world. Because it is so, when this particular spirit soul, after endless births and deaths, goes through the position of entering the spiritual path and ultimately, after millenniums, gets self realized as the evolved spirit soul, then this particular person or living entity thinks about this liberation. All these things take time. Whether it is passing through endless births and deaths, or going to or walking through the path of spiritual realization, getting evolved spiritually, getting self realized, and then thinking about liberation. Only when a living entity or the spirit soul decides on getting liberated from this endless cycle of births and deaths does this process slowly but steadily starts. Here too, we must remember that this living entity is enveloped by four layers of material body. We think that the repeated cycle of birth and death stops after the death of a living entity. But alas, how wrong can we be? When a living entity dies in the normal sense of the term, his or her gross body of that particular birth drops into the terra firma, while the other three subtle bodies remain alive and circulate in the space till a time comes when these three join together and take another gross body, whether human or not, to be born again in this material world. Hence, never ever be under the wrong impression that just because of your death you are liberated from this endless cycle of births and deaths. Liberation is a cerebral process. It starts and applies only to those souls, whether male or female, who are self realized and not before. When this person gets self realized as an evolved, completed spirit soul, then he or she starts thinking about this liberation. At the time of death, this gross body of five sense organs, namely two eyes for sight, two ears for hearing, two nostrils for smell, one tongue for taste, and the skin and genitals for touch, get redundant, and the whole gross body falls into this terra firma, where it gets mixed up with the already existing elements of air, fire, water, and earth. When liberation is about to happen, what happens first is that the etheric body of senses lingers on for some inconsequential time before it gets disintegrated into the ether. This happens because the five senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch have now become redundant because their outlet through the sense organs has already dried and dropped off the face of this earth. The gross body dropping off permanently and not after death is the first step towards liberation. When a person tries to get liberated, the first thing he or she drops off is this gross body. Kindly be told or educated enough or informed enough to know that the dropping off of this gross body does not become the liberation of that living entity. It is only the beginning. When a person is poised for liberation, sooner or later, the first stage is when this third layer of etheric senses and its body get disintegrated permanently. No more is a birth in the gross body of a liberated person applicable. In other words, any spirit soul which was a male or a female during its material births and deaths is subjected to being born in a gross body again in this terra firma. The first stage of liberation is when this person is assured by the powers that be that he or she will not take birth in a gross body into this material world anymore. Because of this, the third layer of etheric body of senses also gets disintegrated. Only then this particular spirit soul reaches the second layer of astral mind of feelings and emotions, but not before that. Once it is assured that he or she will not have a gross identity, even then that particular spirit soul is still enveloped in two layers of material body, namely the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, and the causal body of intelligence and logic. When a person sheds his or her gross body and etheric body and reaches this astral body, he or she may be subjected to repeated births and deaths in that astral body. However, it is more subtle and better than the other two cases where he or she had to be born in the etheric senses and don a gross body. Yes, the brain tissue of the gross body of a living entity does receive vibrations from the astral body of the mind or the logical body of intelligence, yet it does not give that much importance to these vibrations as it gives to the etheric body of senses on an average. That is, at least 75% of the multitude of living entities in this society at a time gives importance only to its etheric body of senses and the vibrations emanating out of it and reaching the brain. Now that this gross body and this etheric body of senses is gone permanently, and this particular spirit soul is poised or settled in the astral body of minds, feeling, and emotions, then the next step for it is to shed even this astral body and reach the causal body level. Swami Yogananda Paramhansa's guru, Swami Yukteswara Giri, told Swami Yogananda Paramhans that he was already settled in this astral body of feelings, mind, and emotions, and that for him there was no return in this world of terra firma and material universe as a gross body or as an etheric body of senses. No more was there any birth for Swami Yukteswara into such a mundane and painful existence as a living human entity. He was already settled on the astral level of mind. Here, because now he was going to remain permanently in this position at least for another 1000 years, he was given an assignment to help those exalted spirit souls which had graduated from repeated births and deaths in the astral body and reach this causal body of intelligence and logic for good. We, as mere mortals, are incapable or not qualified enough to talk about those people who have already reached that causal level. Hence, we will concentrate at best only on the gross body, the etheric senses, and the astral mind. Hence, here I would wish to state that in some cases, these living entities of the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions act as a specimen or representative of genius that possesses those still in the gross body or etheric senses level. That means that there are several people of the etheric of the gross body and etheric senses level who are struggling to come out of this permanently. Such people may or may not due to their own destiny and karma, be possessed by these geniuses, which are actually living entities still in the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. There is a proverb called talent is what you possess, while genius is what possesses you. That means that in some cases, some astral bodied individual living entities possess some really deserving people on the gross body and etheric senses so that those living entities may do something rather impossible or next to impossible in this terra firma. We shall talk about this in my next video in detail. In my next video, we shall try to analyze this genius and how it possesses these living entities in the material world who are still in gross bodies and bodies of etheric senses so that we would be able to understand this process better. Till that time, I would not like to delve on this subject anymore in this particular video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular matter. Please give me your own expert thoughts, opinions, and ideas so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.